Awesome. So I think we can get started. Board, welcome to the call. While we still wait for a few more people to come in, just wanted to, quickly say hi. Thank you again for, joining us on a Friday. And I think the founders in the community are really, really excited about this session. So welcome to Advisory.
Yeah, thank you so much. I was debating if I should turn on my weird 3D avatar for this. I'm working on it while we speak, but thank you for having me. Either way.
Awesome. Is it a Hologram Labs avatar?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if it's going to be too distracting.
Okay. Yeah, I think it would be cool to test out the technology. But either way, thank you again so much. Just to kind of give you an overview, I know I mentioned on our chat as well. Um, Advisory basically is a community I started a month ago. We literally just completed a month this week. And the whole purpose is just bring founders from across the world who are interested in Web3 together. We tend to have conversations such as this. We had Jess from Seed Club previously, Oriel from Zengo, and you're our third lucky guest speaker so far. And yeah, we just have this Telegram group where we connect with each other, share resources, things of that nature. So super excited to welcome you. I have tons of questions for you that I'm going to be going through, and then obviously we'll open it to the community as well if they have any questions from your experiences, board box, things like that. Sounds good?
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for having me, and thanks for everybody for joining today.
Cool. So while you figure out your avatar, do you want to get started with maybe just an introduction about yourself, maybe a bit about your past journey before you got into Web3, what you were up to, what kind of led you into Web3, just so everyone has an understanding.
Sure, I'll do the speed run version of that story, and it's basically two stories. I have this identity that I'm coming to you as today, which is Board Elon Musk. I started it almost 10 years ago as kind of a joke. It's actually the 10th attempt at a parody account. I used to love Twitter. I used to use it very regularly in my human form, and always liked this idea of creating this character. And one day I decided to parody Elon Musk, who at the time was pretty famous, but not as famous, nor did he own the platform that I now use as my primary source of distribution. So a weird turn of events. But in the real world, I worked in the video game industry for over a decade until about 2 years ago. Most of that time was spent working for one of the largest Japanese game publishers in the world. You definitely heard of it. It was a lot of fun. It was cool. But eventually Web3 overtook me. And especially during the pandemic, I found that my curiosity was driving me in the direction of blockchain technology and many other things. And my creative itch really forced me out of working in the games industry and into what it is I do now, which is a weird thing to describe, especially when I go to parties and people ask me what I do. I play a character on Twitter and I do a lot of stuff. But generally speaking, I am very games focused. My goal for the last year or so has been finding the intersection between the traditional games world and Web3, and ultimately helping onboard both game studios and players into this technology, because I do fundamentally think it's going to help make games better. So that was kind of the quick version. We can stop and talk about various elements of that, but just to give everyone a general background for where I'm coming from and a little bit about me, as much as I can share, I guess.
Thank you so much. So I'm curious, because you obviously moved from the hardcore gaming industry to blockchain. Do you think that there was sort of a natural transition that occurred for you? Do you think that there was, just naturally people in the gaming industry will gravitate towards blockchain or being a technologist? So we'd just love to hear how that kind of entry into Web3 went for you.
I think the fundamental principles in video games applies very well to a lot of Web3, because the themes that you see in this space are, leveling up your character, right, through your visibility, through the PFP that you own, through the art that you own, through your crypto wealth, whatever it might be. Like, we're all playing an RPG, a role-playing game to some degree. So I think that somebody who's active in video games will actually really fit in very well in the Web3 space. It's a lot of learning. It's a lot of like overcoming challenges, looking out for villains. Like these are all themes that apply. The nerdy tech stuff, in terms of like learning how to use web wallets and Etherscan and all the stuff that we do, DeFi, like that might seem a bit challenging and a bit of a steep hill to climb for both players and for game developers. But ultimately, I've studied the games industry for the last 20 years or so, and there have been a lot of changes that fundamentally changed that industry, and people have adopted them relatively quickly. Some examples would include the shift from physical media to digital media. Like most people who play games now, they download a file. They don't have a disc or a cartridge that they put in their machine anymore. So that was a pretty big change. The other is the advent of online play. Like video games used to be solo, or you would play them with a friend on your the couch next to you. Now the majority of multiplayer games are happening across the world with people you don't even know. And so, yeah, it took time for all these changes to happen, but the changes were frequent and they did eventually onboard millions and millions of people. And I think that this is yet another opportunity for the games industry to change and adopt something new. And it's not necessarily going to change all gaming forever, but it could create a path to, a certain percentage of players wanting to explore this space. And that's what I'm here for.
I think that's a great perspective. I love how you said, dodging villains. It's become a pretty important part of being in Web3. Couldn't agree more. But just staying on this kind of topic of, the intersection of Web3 and gaming, I would love to hear and, let the audience hear as well what you're currently working on as it pertains to both the industries really, and give an overview maybe of Boardbox.
Sure. Yeah,
also love the hologram, by the way.
Yeah.
The avatar is looking good.
I got it working, but it's not doing. There we go. Okay, here's my creepy moving face. It sort of works, but yeah. So I mentioned 2 years ago I left the video games world, and for me, it made a lot of sense to take that knowledge that I'd built up about publishing games, distributing games, and just everything that comes with that industry, and apply it to this space. And what I found was that a lot of people in crypto were interested in building games, but never really had done it before. And it's a very hard thing to ship a game and to have a successful game. There's literally, millions. There's probably 1 million games that now exist that you can play across Steam, the App Store, and all the consoles and PC. So to stand out is very hard. And a lot of crypto people were like, I'm going to go make a game. That's cool. That'll add value to my, NFT project, etc. But the vast majority of games in general fail. The vast majority of games built by people who have never built games before also fail. And what I wanted to do was set out to be sort of a, curator, somebody who could educate people and really just highlight the best gaming projects that were out there. And so Boardbox was really a solution to my own problem, which is like, I need someone to recommend good games for me to play because I don't have time to go searching around. And I just, I have a limited amount of time to play video games now. I'm, I've got responsibilities, family, all that stuff. So like, just tell me what I need to play and I'll play it. And that doesn't really exist in Web3. So that's what Boardbox is. It's very much like a membership that is designed to help people with very little time, but a little bit of money to spend, find the games they love to play. And I think, thus far the business has been mixed, and it's for the primary reason of there aren't really that many games yet on the market. I think when we started the business, candidly, we anticipated the speed of production and release of blockchain games to be faster than they really were. This year, it feels like there are a lot of serious games that look like video games that are dropping, and that's going to be really good for us as curators of gaming. But it's been a little bit of a slog, to be fully transparent. And I know people who are joining this call are founders, they're running their own businesses. So I don't want to sugarcoat things. I want to kind of share our journey. And so a big thing for us really has been building our reputation and making ourselves ready so that when the blockchain games industry is in fact as big as we believe it will be, all that work that we put into building recognition, of our brand can pay off, and then we can execute on, getting the best games and forming the best relationships, and eventually, making money so we can pay the bills. Also important.
It's a great overview. And also, I love what you said, because on Oriel's call that we had last week, someone asked Oriel that, sometimes as founders, you're early to an idea and you think that this idea is going to be huge, but maybe the market's just not ready for it yet. So what do you typically do in those situations? So I love you sharing that, you kind of figured out that let's build our reputation in the meanwhile, maybe build our presence in this ecosystem. I think that's a great way to look at it. And just kind of, sticking on the theme of blockchain gaming, I know you said there's some big potential titles that might release this year. What are some of the general advancements or tech developments that you're seeing that seem promising to you from a Web3 gaming perspective? Because we still have this hurdle of trying to convince traditional gamers who might not really see the value in Web3 to embrace this new era of gaming. So I'd love to hear, in your perspective, what are some things? Maybe it is AI, maybe it's just, these crazy new immersive worlds that are coming about that could potentially change some minds.
Yeah, from a blockchain perspective, I don't think there's necessarily any new tech that's coming out. I think it's a different approach, which is game companies realizing that they need to put the game out first and then sell digital collectibles, because those things are not worth anything if there's no game to use them for, or the game isn't fun. The reason Fortnite, can basically sell digital files and skins to people is because there's millions of people who want to play Fortnite. And so, like, it's a flex. It's something that only works when you have eyeballs on you. So I think, yeah, that approach is what you see more games doing. They're not using mints or selling NFTs to fund their game development. And they're realizing that that is never enough money anyway, because it costs too much to bring a game to life. So that's sort of like on the blockchain front. Basically the hiding of the NFT / Web3 elements is really key. And I think that's going to be the path to success. From an AI perspective, which I personally, don't really see as kind of Web3. I categorize it differently, but I know it's somewhat intertwined right now. That's really just going to help with bringing games to market faster. So when you look at really large titles, and I'll just use a few recent big ones like Elden Ring, or Cyberpunk 2077, or even the new Zelda game that came out, which is awesome, by the way, if you haven't played it. It takes 3 to 5 years to produce that game. And a lot of that work is kind of individually rendering land and characters and weapons and vehicles and all these things. It's very, very tedious work. And so the human element there is not necessarily going to go away, but it will be expedited by AI, where basically an artist can create 1 or 2 character models and then basically tell the computer, go make 18 versions of this. So it's less kind of manual labor. And what that means is that games might come to market in 1 year instead of 5 years. And so that's awesome. If you're a game developer, that's great. It might make games cheaper. I don't think so. They'll probably still want to make the same amount of money, but ultimately what I think that means for us, or I guess anybody pursuing game development, is there's going to be a lot more games on the market, right? Because it's easier to make a game, and whenever it's easier to make any kind of media, you saw this with like blogging or podcasting, there will be more and more and more of it, and it lives forever. And so every day you are going to be fighting for attention, as a producer of content, and as a consumer of content, you will be increasingly, avalanched by the amount of stuff that you can enjoy. And that's where I think like the role of the curator, and that's something I'm trying to do, is going to be really important. And I think that's where the attention economy and people who can command attention are going to be really important. I do think from a startup standpoint and a founder standpoint, having really good tech was a very strong moat or edge. And I think that will not be as important as time goes on, because as technology becomes more and more accessible to non-coders and people like me, then your ability to sell and get attention is probably going to be a stronger advantage versus your ability to code faster, for example. That's my prediction. Could be wrong. I don't know. We'll see. But all that said, I think basically there's going to be a lot more stuff, a lot faster, a lot cheaper. And you need to figure out ways to be creative when you stand out.
was a great answer. I think I agree with your perspective that, both the speed and cost of building things is going to come down to an extent because of AI's availability. So I think now is really the time for people to get creative and come up with potentially, just unique concepts that could leverage the tech that we've been given. So, kind of my last question on the gaming front really is more of your personal opinion. Is there anything on the market today that you've tried in the Web3 gaming industry that you've personally enjoyed and could also potentially be, a great way to convince someone outside of our space to try out the tech and see the value in it?
Yeah, I think what one game that I've been citing as a good example is called EV.io. That's literally the URL of the game. It's a really simple first-person shooter. You run around an arena and you try to survive as long as you can. Pretty common, first-person shooter style, model that everybody's familiar with who's played video games. But I love it for a couple of reasons. One, it runs in your browser, so you don't need to download a client on your computer. You don't need to have a specific console or whatever. It's just load up the site and go play. Two, it really doesn't force any sort of Web3 stuff down your throat. Like, you can just play for free as a guest, get a feel for it, and then if you like the game, you can buy skins and guns and all that sort of stuff. And it's not the most impressive game in that genre compared to something like a Call of Duty or Destiny, but for a Web3 free game that runs really fast inside of a browser, it does a damn good job of basically explaining the model that I think is the future, which is like, make games really easy, really cheap, let people test it and have fun with it before you asking them for money. And that's really where gaming has gone in the last 10 years. Like, this term that describes this is free to play. Like, most games used to cost 50 or $60, and you had to know that it was good before you bought it. Or you had to rent it, right, from Blockbuster or whatever, if anyone knows what that is. So today, most games that come out, well, not most, but a lot of games that come out are free to play. They let you try it first, and if you like it, you can buy stuff in the game, and that's how they make money. And so that has become extremely common, and I think Web3 will likely take that approach. So I do think that anybody who is trying to charge a lot of money up front with NFTs or otherwise, it's tough. It's not the model, it's not the direction the games industry has gone. And so it's a very uphill battle if that's what you're going to try to do.
It's an interesting question of charging too much money up front. I mean, there's a few gaming NFTs that I've bought that were really expensive, and their whole selling point was that we obviously need to fundraise to build this game out to the level that traditional game studios have capital. But then, yeah, on the other side, you want to try to put up that value proposition first before, you expect people to start paying big money for it. I also like your point of, just building fun games. I think that's, at least initially, that was getting lost quite often, is people were building NFT games rather than fun games that utilize NFTs. So that's, I think, another great perspective to have. But kind of moving away a bit from gaming for now, I want to get into the story behind Board, Elon Musk, and this amazing identity that you've been able to establish online. There's a lot of founders in here that are either just starting out the journey of focusing on their personal brand, their personal identity, or just need a better understanding of how to build these things organically. So I would love to hear your experience, building this notable online presence. What strategies or approaches worked for you? What would you recommend someone else can adopt to try to grow their personal brand? And how do you leverage this identity now for your work specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly will give at least 30% of the credit to just picking the right person to parody when I did. But as I said, I tried this 10 times before. So, it was a little bit of like, taking swings and experimentation to see what made sense. But I think, that aside, like, pretend that's not at your disposal. I think for me, I really pulled from my experience doing improv comedy writing, which is something that I did as like a side thing. I never really wanted to be an entertainer or anything, but like I worked in corporate America, but I thought it would be cool to go learn how to like write, comedy sketches and do improv. And generally, what I learned from that process was at the beginning of a season, when a comedian or a sketch comedy group is doing a show, it's pretty rough. And then over time, as they're doing shows and listening to what the audience laughs at or doesn't laugh at, they refine the product over and over and over until they know what works well. So the thing that I've been doing for basically the full 9-10 years on Twitter is I delete tweets. Like if it doesn't resonate, if it doesn't really seem like it makes sense, like maybe it's funny to me, maybe it's interesting to me, but nobody gets it, I delete it. Because the point is, I want the first impression. If someone is coming to my profile or discovering me for the first time, I want them to see the best stuff, not the stuff that just I think is important. And so I'd say about 25-30% of the tweets that I put out, I delete within a few hours if they don't really resonate. That's a really small tactical thing, but I think it speaks to the overall idea of really study, your own content and what works well and what doesn't. But that said, I also am not, Mr. like, I have to do what the algorithm tells me, and I'm only going to like create content that gets engagement. Sometimes I just want to use this as a journal and I want to just put out what I want. And I think at this point, I don't really care about growing this count. Like I've reached the point where I'm comfortable with this many followers, and if it never goes up, that's fine. I don't care. To me, it's more about credibility at this point than it is about distribution. Other pieces of advice, I mean, despite what it might seem like, the most valuable thing, or the most valuable way I connect with people and get work done is through private messages, not through, Twitter publicly. The trick there is you need to be able to actually private message with the people you want to work with. So I rely a lot more on connections and friends and introductions. But yeah, I would say this account was partially luck, partially just grinding, continuing to create content, and really not give up on this idea of doing it as a pseudonym. For me, that's just kind of like a feather in my cap. I'm not anybody very interesting in real life. I think I'm a cool guy, but I'm not like anybody here would probably know in real life. And so to me, I wanted to create this alternate persona. And while I have nothing to hide, I also have no benefit to share my real world ID. And so I want to see how long I can take this. Like if I get to August of this year without being doxxed, that's 10 years, operating as a pseudonym. And I'm not sure anybody has really done that before. And it's important for me to do that because I want to set an example for, there are people who are pseudonymous or anonymous, and they are good actors. They are not scammers. They're not going to run off with your money. I really value the reputation that I've built. And I think that, the reputation piece is something that is the most important and easiest to lose if you don't operate ethically. So yeah, that's some random thoughts from me. Sorry for the brain dump.
No, yeah, I think that's a perfect segue into my next question because you mentioned, things like reputation, your anonymous or pseudonymous identity. And I know you and I have had conversations about this previously as well, the importance of, reputation, especially in the Web3 space these days. So I'm curious, in your personal experience, you said you're about to complete 10 years with this identity. What are some of the pros and cons you faced, I guess, in not fully doxing yourself? Do you think it's helped you? Do you think there's been several challenges and limitations because there's a lot of animal JPEGs and PFPs, as you can see even on this call? So I'd love to hear in your experience, is it really possible to build meaningful relationships and connections behind this matrix version of Elon Musk PFP?
Tron is the inspiration. It is harder, right? I can't go to conferences as easily. Sometimes I go to conferences and nobody knows I'm there, which is fun, just lurking. That meme with the guy in the corner. It's like a white and black drawing Wojak, and it's like nobody knows. Like there's people partying and having fun. It's like nobody knows I'm actually bored Elon Musk. Like that's me. So yeah, I mean, I don't that's a con. The other con is with like fundraising, for example. Like in 2021, we raised a a pre-seed round for Boardbox. And we did that because we built a really good relationship with a couple of venture firms, and they did trust us and ultimately wrote a check before they even met me in person. Eventually they did, because they got to send the check to a real person. Board Elon doesn't have a checking account, but it is trickier to raise money as a anon or pseudonym. You might get the impression that in crypto, like, nobody cares about that, but a lot of people are conservative and they do care. So that was a con. It's not the end of the world, but it is a con. But mostly I would say this is upside, because I'm not somebody who has the need for attention to my personal life. I don't need to have my family be connected to what I do here. I don't need my friends to know what I do here. And I also just don't need to bring my entire self to this space. I bring what I want to bring, and that's my decision. And I think that, with the rise of things like Facebook and social media in general, people got into this kind of like, they got into this space where they thought, I need to put as much as myself into the internet as possible, just broadcasting everything about their life. And I have found that in the long term, there's not a lot of upside to that. There's mostly downsides. And so what you do when you create a pseudonym, and I think anybody should consider this who's on the call, is like, it doesn't take much, right? Spin up a Twitter account. It takes 5 minutes. If there's a really specific thing that you're interested in that is maybe outside of the expectations of what you should be interested in, because, maybe you're a startup founder who works in finance, but you actually love music and you want to like start, a band, start a separate identity, right? Like, that can be your brand for that particular thing that you're interested in, and no one will judge you based on your past experience. I think that the space has really just opened up the idea of the meritocracy, where you are judged on your thinking and your behavior, and not what school you went to or what country you're from. And I think that's really important. So I'm a big advocate of this. And I think for people who are shy and maybe don't necessarily want to be exposing, their real world self and failing in public, it's a good opportunity to just experiment with stuff, like create this new character, put some stuff out there, see if it works. And if it doesn't work out, cool. It's not a ding on your personal record that everyone will then laugh at you about. Even though in real life, nobody really will laugh at you. They don't care if you fail. So I'm a big fan. I want to encourage other people to do it. And I'm trying to be, again, a role model who shows how this can work well.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. And also, yeah, I was laughing because I think we're basically two sides of the coin, because I think since I got on social media like 14, 15 years ago, I've always been fully doxxed. And, now I'm kind of realizing, and there are moments where I wish I wasn't, because I just feel like sometimes it is this weird social pressure that you're subjected to just by being, fully out there. So I've been trying to dial back down. Like, I've archived tons of Instagram posts and hidden stuff about me on Tumblr. So it's pretty interesting hearing your perspective as well, being, pseudonymous for so long. Just kind of, the last point on this identity question. In the Web3 space, there's lately been a lot of concerns around anonymous identities. There's been, involuntary doxings. There's all these KYC requirements that are coming out. You said, even for fundraising, you had to, at some point, dox yourself. Do you think that this whole concept of hiding your real self online is going to get harder as time goes on, especially in Web3? And that will, I guess, be the social pressure to fully reveal everything about yourself in order to be trusted, build reputation, and, potentially even sell things?
I don't think it's going to get harder. I think that, first of all, because remote work has become a lot more common, there is going to be a migration, or let me rephrase that. I think there's going to be a lot more competition for places to live and work where people feel that they have more freedom to operate as they wish. And so knowing that countries should probably be a bit more flexible in how much surveillance of their citizens is going to need to be put in place, and we'll see where that goes. Ultimately, I think there's also the need to protect people from fraud and crime and all that stuff, and so there's a careful balance. But I think this technology is just getting started. It's getting more and more robust, and I think it's becoming more accessible as well. And so it's not going to get harder for people to, transact, anonymously. It's not going to get harder for people to communicate anonymously, I don't think. And if it does, then I think that then there's probably other scarier things happening in the world that, we need to be worried about versus me knowing, compared to me having to reveal who I am. So no, I have an optimistic perspective on this, that actually, what I'm doing will become normal. I think it's already normal in gaming. Like, everybody plays video games against people who are just gamer tags, but I think it'll become more normal in the rest of the, society as well.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so I'm assuming you're not getting your irises scanned by an orb anytime soon.
I am not. But I mean, I will say, like, there is a real person connected to board Elon, and I pay my taxes, and I, do everything I'm supposed to do. So I just have a separate, identity that's not connected to it publicly.
Kind of the last questions that I had prepared for you, and then we could let the founders get some questions in as well, is around the concept of fundraising. So you said that with Boardbox you did around in 21, I believe you said. So we'd just love to hear the story of, that fundraising process, how it went, what are some things that worked for you, maybe some things that didn't work. And then from there, I think, questions about runway and things like that we can get into.
Yeah, for us, it's worth noting 2021, very different than right now. A little bit more liquidity flowing and bullishness in the market. But I think that aside, ultimately, we ended up raising money from two different firms, and it really came down to building a relationship with them before we wanted to raise money. My co-founder and I had, basically met with a few VCs that were really into gaming as well. We every couple of weeks would just jump on a call and talk about the industry and share knowledge, and we did that for like 6 months or so, until the idea for Boardbox came along. And because we had built this really strong relationship, it made it really easy then to pitch them on raising money. So we didn't do the formal process of like, let's, do this hit list and reach out to 30 different firms and, do the traditional pitch and all that. It was very organic. And the people that I have spoken to, fellow founders that I've spoken to, have raised a lot of money, have all talked about this, that it's relationship based. It is not, here's the process and here's what your pitch deck should look like and here's the exact amount of money you should raise. Like, you can follow everyone's advice and take that formula to try to raise money. I have no advice for you if that's the approach. I think the reality is the world works on nepotism and relationships, and you should press any advantage you have. The problem is right now, it's just harder, right? Like, you can have a good relationship with somebody, but their hands are tied. And so patience is key, and you kind of have to keep working and building until you're in a really strong position right now to pull the trigger. I mean, we candidly, tested the waters of raising a seed round this year, and even with my big distribution and the progress we've made, valuations were not where we wanted them to be, and not everybody felt comfortable putting more money into a Web3 gaming business. And so we decided, okay, we're gonna operate lean for a little bit longer, build a stronger case, and then go back when we feel more comfortable. I think that the worst thing you can do is give up too much of your company and basically end up in a place where you're working for someone. Like, you're a founder because you want to run your company, and if you give up too much of it or raise too much money, candidly, you feel like an employee of somebody else's, and that to me isn't fun. Like, I'll just go work, for Google and make $500,000 a year or something. I gave up the safety of a job in corporate America because I wanted to do what I wanted to do. So yeah, if you're a founder, I would say, if you can raise now, great. But it is just challenging, and you ultimately have a finite amount of time that you can spend on your business, and you have to decide, is right now the time that I want to spend up to 50% of my waking hours trying to raise money from someone and convince them that what I'm going to build is great, or do I want to be super lean and build and then wait when I have leverage over the VC versus vice versa.
For sharing. I think that's a great perspective. I have a follow-up question on, operating lean and managing those funds before they run out. But in the meanwhile, I just wanted to let the founders know, if you have any questions for board, just start raising your hands, and I'll look at the queue and call on you one by one. So get those hands up. Board, my kind of final question for now for you is around the runway. So obviously you raised last in 21. You said the gaming industry in the Web3 space didn't really deliver in the time frame you had in mind as well. So how are you managing your runway? How are you managing expectations? And just making sure that you can continue to build towards the vision that you originally had.
Yeah, I mean, we've kept the employee count pretty low. We're 4 full-time people right now. Not everybody has that ability. Sometimes you've got to have a larger team. In our case, we've been able to keep it fairly lean. The co-founder and I especially have really managed our own salaries, and I think that sometimes, especially with first-time founders, getting a big pile of money means I got to go hire as many people as possible. And they forget that pile of money is also your runway, right? It's like you have to keep enough money to keep paying all those people that you hired. And the other piece of it is, if you scale too quickly, it is hard to manage all of the people. And then a lot of the folks that you hired maybe are very expensive and not producing at the level you want. So, to the point we made earlier about AI, technology is getting cheaper and more accessible. And I think wherever you can avoid setting yourself up for expensive recurring costs, and that usually is humans, try to do it. I'm not this guy who wants to basically have computers replace humanity and all that. But if you're a lean founder, you gotta take what you have out there. So just really focus on the elements that are important to growing your business from an attention standpoint, from a revenue standpoint, keeping you alive. And don't overspend. That's really what it comes down to. I think that, if you are in a place where you can work for the next 12 months comfortably and not raise money, then now is a good time to just, operate that way lean, and then go raise money later this year or early next year.
Really for this topic for hours, and I think we've seen a lot of NFT projects raise too much too quickly and burn through it just as fast. And now they're kind of dealing with the consequences of that. So I do like the idea of trying to bootstrap as long as you can. I think Web3, especially because of the bull market, there became these false expectations that you need to raise huge amounts of money to build something meaningful. And I think bootstrapping still obviously has a lot of merit behind it. But yeah, before I kind of dive into all the stuff that I love talking about, I see some founders have raised their hands, so I'll just call on them to ask their questions. Ash, you're first on my list. Do you have a question for board?
Hey guys, yes, I do. Firstly, I want to say thanks so much, Satvik, for always organizing such interesting guests and for organizing these calls generally for us. Much appreciated. And board Elon, thanks so much for sharing your experience and your weird wit and your talent with us. It's much appreciated. So given your extensive background in gaming, I'm wondering what opportunities are there for writers in Web3 gaming? Because I'm a writer and I'm working on a short story series, but writers in Web3, well, we aren't exactly minting it, so to speak. So I'm just curious about what you think might be a good avenue for a writer to pursue in Web3 generally, and in Web3 gaming specifically. And then also, I'm pseudonymous as well. I'm kind of forced to be because I'm a full-time journalist where I live, and I can't dox because then I'd get fired, and that would be no fun. So I'm wondering if you can share some tips on how you ensure your identity stays hidden, because you seem to be very good at that, given that your security expert couldn't even figure out who you are.
Yeah, so the first part of the question, writing is certainly being threatened with tools like ChatGPT. It is easier to replicate writing than probably any other type of media, which is unfortunate. But the standpoint of gaming, I think there's a lot of opportunities for writers versus like news or other places. Gaming is all about narrative, and I think that like one thing that I saw when I worked for the Japanese gaming firm was this process called localization. So a video game might be made in Japan, but then it needs to be translated to the United States and Europe and Africa, so many other places. And it's not just a matter of translation. It's actually taking the story and interpreting the story that was written for another culture and recontextualizing it for the local market. Because what makes sense in one country might not make sense in others, especially as it relates to, you know, humor and other kind of like specific things to a particular culture. So I think localization in gaming is going to be really important, and not just localization or translation from one language to another, but from machine to human, right? Because a lot of these tools are pretty good at giving you like 80 to 90% of the narrative potentially, or writing sort of the bits and pieces that fill out the narrative. But ultimately, you know, crafting a good story and a creative story and a novel story should not sound derivative. And machine writing is very derivative. And so I think that in the games industry, not only can you still make a living, you know, writing fresh stories for games, so dialogue for characters, but I think increasingly, if you understand how these AI writing tools work, you can both help produce kind of the drafts of the writing, and then also help refine it and make it ready for people to enjoy. And then on the pseudonymity front, it's not really, I mean, anything particularly magical. It's basically like create accounts, you know, that are not connected in any way to your real world name. You know, spin up a Gmail account or whatever, any kind of email account for your pseudonym. And that is basically the key to creating a Twitter or any other social media profile. And then just don't overlap them. You know, if you have the capability or the funds to buy a second computer or a second phone and only, you know, send information from that particular machine instead of the other one that you use for your primary life, do that too. It's really, I think, human behavior more than like a tech problem. And ultimately, I think if you want to, like, you know, dox yourself to certain people, and I certainly do, when I like trust someone, I'll go and hang out with them and have coffee with them. Just make sure that they're that they're a person who can keep a secret. And I've definitely done that with hundreds of people at this point, and everyone's been cool and didn't, you know, reveal who I was. And if they do, that sucks, you know, my bad, and I'll shit all over them on Twitter, but whatever. You got to just be careful about who you trust. So that's basically my strategy. I don't have any other sort of like expert tips. It's just, you know, keep your two lives clean and separate.
Cool. Thank you so much. That answers those questions perfectly. Thanks.
For your question. Kieran, you're up next on my list.
Sure, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, just echo the previous thanks to both Board and Satvik for having this call. It's been a great chat the first half hour. I really enjoyed listening to that, and it's it's a real privilege to get the opportunity to ask a question, so I will get on with it. So I'm interested in like where you see us on the path to kind of mass adoption in the world of Web3, particularly on the gaming front, because there's obviously been a lot of backlash from the traditional Web2 gamers into like NFTs and things, often like badly received. We've seen examples of companies try and make that step into Web3 and kind of step back as a result of backlash from the gamers. And so I was interested in your thoughts about kind of why that was happening, where we are on the road to curing that problem, and what kind of steps you can see the industry taking in order to fix that.
Yeah, I think that it's overstated, this problem. I think that there are a vocal minority of gamers, who I affectionately refer to as neckbeards, who really like to shout and complain about every new thing that comes into the world of gaming. And basically, you know, when I've had conversations with game developers and players in South Korea and in Japan, this is all very different. They're neutral or open to it. And I think in the US, like I've witnessed a lot of these technological rollouts that, you know, have first started off angering gamers and eventually they've adopted it, with the biggest being the move from physical media to digital media. At first, like people really hated this idea, but now it's the standard. Where I will give them credit, the people who complain about this, is their fear that this will sort of ruin games. And if you introduce money into games, it can remove the fun and ruin it for people who are there just for entertainment and joy. And I think that's valid. I think that if you're watching, you know, a game of basketball, you know that the players themselves are not influenced by someone in the stands who is betting on the game, right? If that person wins money, doesn't matter. It's not going to impact the game itself. And so a good game developer will be able to separate the monetary elements of games from the game itself. And those who don't, they will attract gambling and gamblers and not actual video game players, and they will not succeed and have the success that the biggest games in the world do. So I think this will all shake out in time. But right now, yes, there's definitely a lot of, you know, vocal minority that's influencing some game companies to tread cautiously into the space.
Brilliant. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Awesome. Thanks, Kieran, for your question. Up next on my list is Fiona with her cute dog. Fiona, do you have a
Hi.
question for board?
Bootsy says hello, by the way. So thank you so much. Yeah, I just kind of wonder. Thank you so much again for doing this for us. What are the AI tools that you use to automate certain parts of your business, or just to make your life easier? That's kind of my latest. Like, I love hearing from people how they're using AI to really make their business leaner, more efficient. Just operate better and without so much human effort. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, full transparency, don't really use it for business at all. At this point, it's more just like effing around and having fun. The one area we sort of use it is for visuals. So like things like Stable Diffusion or Midjourney. You know, sometimes in the past, like a business would have to whip up a nice graphic for an event or something like that, and you might pay a designer to do it. And now, you know, you can create something pretty quick on your own that looks decent. So that's a little bit of it. But in terms of writing, I frankly don't have enough experience in prompting to use it to the degree that I would want to really like speed up my process. And a lot of my communications are really not like long enough to justify it. So I wish I could tell you like, here are all the brilliant ways I'm using it. There's a lot of people on Twitter who write threads about how you can maximize your business and your speed by using AI tools, and you're going to be left behind if you don't do it. But that's not me. I don't know. I thrive mostly on standing out and doing things differently. And I think that if you overdo it with AI, you're going to sound very redundant to what other people sound like. And I can almost tell when someone has written me an email or something using AI, because it just sounds a little off. And that'll change over time probably. But right now, I kind of sense it and I don't like it. I take it as disrespect to some degree. So I guess tread cautiously with, you know, implementing it into your business and don't get overly reliant on it. It's still useful to actually know how to write well, I think.
For sure. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Fiona, that was a great question. Boy, that made me laugh. The threads about AI, and it's never ending on Twitter. So it feels like the algorithm just wants you to see those threads every day. But Attila, last hand up, so we'll go to you for your question.
Thank you very much. And again, Satwik, thank you for organizing this for us. It's really amazing. So we love it. And I take notes. I took notes, and my key things were connection, patience, community, and communication. So these are, I believe, very important things. And I have a question to you. I'm not in the game business. I connected a physical product with Web3, and what do you think? Of course, I'm doxed. I have to, I believe, but it's okay. Do you think that I will be able to use those things patients community and those things to build that project, which is product related and connected to Web3. Do you have any advice how to do that?
I think from my experience in physical products, I've designed and shipped to board games, tabletop games, like physical games. And I learned a lot in that process. It was a very small endeavor or project for me, but learning about, logistics of printing and shipping and returns and moving physical atoms across the world is very hard, and it always costs more money than you think it will cost. And so this is without the Web3 element, right? This is just like the logistics of physical products are difficult. Add Web3 on top of it, it adds more complexity. I think that we do live in a world where verification is very important, and making sure that you understand what you're buying is real is important. So I think there's opportunities there. But yeah, I mean, I think all the things we discussed today apply just as much to the physical world as the digital world. It's just that the stakes are higher for you with the physical world because the cost to produce things are higher, and the cost to distribute them are higher. So if anything, all the things we discussed today are even more important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Actually, and it's not for promo, guys. I'm sorry. So we are talking about an energy drink, which is a crypto drink. So the idea is that in each can, there is crypto asset inside what you can collect. So therefore, that's the reason why I say it's Web3. And regarding the distribution, we will distribute by land or country by country. So that's my intention. And yeah, thank you very much. I learned a lot, and I believe that this community will also help me a lot. So thank you for your answers. And again, Satwik, thank you very much. It's amazing to be part of this community. Cool. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Attila, for your question. I think we have time for one last question, board.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. Cool. So, Abhinav, you're next on my list.
Hi. Sorry, Satwik, for raising my hand at the last possible moment.
No worries.
It's great to be here, guys. Shout out to Satwik for making this possible, man. It really is a privilege to be in the same room as Elon. Getting on with my question, you mentioned how important pseudonymity is to you and for Ash as well. I wanted to ask that if you were at a meetup, is Board Elon in the room right now?
That's me being a smart ass. Sorry.
All right, should I go on? Right.
Go for it.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I wanted to ask that if you were at a Web3 meetup in real life, and facing the real possibility of staying pseudonymous, the Wojak meme you mentioned, would you be inclined to use a pseudonymous chat app for speed networking, where you don't have options for name, gender, or designation, but you could connect to verified profiles with a geo-fenced chat? This is a process that I've actually given up on because of not being able to find a proper revenue model for it. But you and Ash just spurred me to ask this question. What kind of a revenue model do you think would this chat app require?
I think you have to definitely think through what is like the user base of a product like that. And I think I would probably be a very likely type of user, but I still would have questions around it. I think fundamentally, like, in-person stuff is changing. I really question if I even go to events anymore, because I can operate and do everything I need to through DMs and through calls like this. And so the reason I go to events is there's maybe a specific person that I already know I want to meet. And I don't need, a product like you're offering necessarily to do it. So I don't know enough about it to steer you one way or the other. But I think before you get to the revenue question, you really have to think through how many customers am I going to be able to use this thing? And when you answer that question, then you can decide how you want to make revenue from it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Abhinav. Nicholas, do you have like a quick question? I see you're the last hand, so I just want to make sure we get to you as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that a ton. Damn, my camera's not going on. Anyways, Elon, what's up, bro? I appreciate you being on here. I love what you're doing. The gamification of game discovery is right up my alley. Part of our thesis with our platform, which is also game focused, is the concept that ownership of game items really opens up a lot of opportunity for emergent gameplay experiences that are kind of game adjacent. And then a lot of these are really going to be social. And I want to hear your perspective as, do you think there is room in the market now for new social gaming platforms to emerge with, incorporation of ownership and other types of digital assets?
Yeah, the example that I think about a lot is, I don't know if this was in every country, but in the United States, we had this thing called HQ Trivia, and it was like this live game, and people would answer trivia questions, and everybody had it running on their phone at the same time, and it felt like watching a TV show at the same time, and it really just took the country by storm, and then it sort of died for a variety of reasons. But to me, that was a very new model that quickly scaled and presented itself as an opportunity that since then has not been repeated. I think that you could layer, sort of blockchain into that for sure. And I think some startups are probably trying to do so. So I think that's a massive opportunity and something that people will continue to crave as we, work remotely and don't get as much, social interaction during the day as we used to, or many people don't. So I think, broadly speaking, it's a really cool thing to pursue.
Yeah, agreed. Cool, man. I appreciate that. Thank you. I won't take up a bunch of time. I know we're at the end.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nicholas. And Board, I know we're at the end of time. I know you have a hard stop. So just any final thoughts? Where can people find you? I know you love to advise and mentor companies as well. We have a lot of amazing founders in this community. And if they want you on board and want more of your insights, what's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, I'm definitely good at responding on Twitter. If anybody here wants to email me, that's cool too. It's just boardelon, one word, @gmail.com. I do take on like a couple of advisory roles per year. I've got one on the slate already. Generally speaking, I like to do it in the world of gaming because, it's what I know. But other than that, I would say if you are into gaming, my company's site is boardbox.io. It's free to create a membership. Would love if anyone here joins and checks it out. We'll be doing some cool stuff in the next few weeks. And otherwise, just tweet me fun stuff on Twitter, and I will like it and heart it and respond to you with something witty.
Amazing. Yeah. I'm also going to try to get you into the Telegram group and maybe mentor some companies in here on an individual basis. But Board, thank you so much again. Second time hosting you. It's been just as pleasurable, if not more. Thank you again for your time. And look forward to continuing this relationship with Advisory.
Thanks so much. Thanks for inviting me to speak, and everyone have a wonderful Friday and weekend.
Awesome. You too. Thank you.
Thanks, Board.
And thanks everyone for joining as well. Really, really appreciate your time. 1 month of Advisory done and lots of cool, exciting stuff coming up. So I'll see you guys next week on our community calls.